see you guys in the dark.
I've had a couple of stalkers. The one that freaked me out the most was the one that was in another country. We had never met. We met on a website for pen pals. He lived in another country. Our conversations were pretty great. He developed feelings really fast. I liked him very much in the beginning. Our relationship became sexual in nature. We had made plans to meet. I was concerned with some things that I considered red flags, confirmed by my friends and my family. I decided to back off a little bit. He didn't like that at all. I was super beta, trying to keep the peace without hurting or losing my friends. I started lying to him out of fear. He'd interrogate me for hours about where I was going, who I was with, if I went to a party. He would both ask if I slept with anybody. Then he would say that he kind of hoped that I did so that I could tell him how the sex was. It was getting to be too much. I was no longer interested in him romantically or sexually, but I would still engage with him sexually because I was afraid of him. In the meantime, I met and fell in love with my current SO, who happens to be absolutely wonderful. My stalker was obsessed with everything about our budding relationship and wouldn't leave me be. I realized finally that stalker had made me feel disgusting, and that I should not be involved with somebody who I was afraid with and disgusted by. I told him that I didn't want to hear from him ever again. He had ignored me. My SO had contacted him, told him to leave me alone. He tried to interrogate him about the nature of our relationship, but my SO had shut him down. I blocked him on everything. I realized that he was still reading my blog, so I deleted the whole thing. He made new email accounts and Facebook accounts constantly. He relentlessly Googled me and my SO, to the point that our names were amongst the top searches on multiple search engines. When he elicited no response, he started sending screenshots of times that we had been sexual. I was mortified, but since I had been 100% honest with him, it didn't break us up. He was obviously disgusted. We never responded to anything that was sent. To my knowledge, he still creeps on us. But after that, everything mostly had stopped. I know he's thousands of miles away, and I've had stalkers who were in my immediate area, but he still scares me the most. My high school boyfriend and I, who happened to be a senior, split up. He was already controlling, judgmental, and abusive. I was moving on to college at the local university. He had went crazy, lost his damn mind. He began by threatening messages, about 200 a day, phone calls, showing up during my classes, showing up at my house. He broke into my car, sat in the back seat. My best friend and I had gone to the movies, came out. I was going to drop her off at home, and she noticed a huge mark on the passenger side of the car, looked in the back seat, and there he was, lying on the floor, trying to hide. I bought a new car with new plates. He broke into my dorm room. I then left the dorms because I felt unsafe, and moved into an apartment not far from the college campus, with 2 female roommates. He found out where I was living, and broke in there too while I was in the shower. I told him to get the fuck out. He came after me with a knife. Had to call the cops, and I locked myself into the bathroom. He was gone by the time the cops had showed up. I was dating a newer guy, who was an absolute gentleman. I warned him about my ex-boyfriend. Ex-boyfriend crashes one of our dates, jumps the new guy with 5 friends. I also end up with my face smashed in for being a cheating whore. I moved back into my parents' house. Ex-boyfriend attempted to break into my parents' house at 5 o'clock on a Sunday, so my entire family was home. My dad had caught him, put a gun into his mouth. That was the end of that. By the way, my dad is 6'5" and ex-military. He happens to be pretty scary. A couple of years back when I was in college, I was the victim of a long-term stalker. I happened to be male, and about 21 years old at the time. It started out on Valentine's Day. I started to receive secret admirer type of text messages from an unknown number. I assumed that it was a friend of mine playing a joke, as I was in a room with a handful of tech-savvy people at the time. I tried to gauge their reactions and ask if anyone was messing with me. They all had denied it, and I believed them. They're pretty bad liars. It was further confirmed that it was none of them when I got a phone call from the number. A voice on the other end said, "This is," happened to say my name. I replied, "Yes, who is this?" hoping that I could identify the voice. At that point, they had hung up and resumed texting me. Things started to get weird when the person began asking pretty personal questions, including repeatedly asking, "Are you going to do something tonight?" To which I replied, "Yes, I was working." But they kept insisting that we should meet up. On top of all this, I was getting various messages to me from a separate email. This confirmed that it wasn't a real number, and I now had a username to connect to the person. I don't know if it was their intention, but I actually enjoy trying to figure out things like this. Took it upon myself to expose this person without giving away anything about myself, so I kept it up. I texted them back for a while, dug for more information about the person, compiled it into a profile, and eliminated possibilities. Unfortunately, this just encouraged them, as they insisted that I send pictures, take pictures, pics add to the conversation, stuff like that. And then they sent a weird one. A white lacy dress hanging in their closet, with the accompanying text, "My wedding dress for when I marry you." Various heart and love emojis attached to it. They continued to pry about where I was going to be at that evening. I still refused to give them any details. Then they dropped where they were going to be, a party on campus that very night. I couldn't go regardless, because I was working. Then I got another bombshell. They asked if I lived in apartment 68, which I did. I recognized the style of apartment that they were in based on a picture from earlier, so I decided that I would throw them a curveball. "You live in this type of complex, right?" "What? How did you know?" "I recognized your door." All the shitty apartments had the same color door frame, which was visible in the edge of the picture that they sent. The conversation kind of fizzled out from there. I didn't go to that party, and didn't get any more text messages. Fast forward to about November, the following school year. I was a senior, and busy as hell. One evening I got a text from an unknown number. "Is this?" They gave my full name. So I had played dumb, pretended like I wasn't freaking out that after many months this person was contacting me once again. And I still hadn't figured out who this person was. Those questions were instantly more personal, and really weirded me out. Don't ruin the fun. Not knowing who I am is part of the mystery. I won't tell you who I am. Not now. There's too much to lose. I don't want you to know. Not because I'm being cruel. It's just better if you didn't know. I'm pretty tired of this shit, and trying to work, but I want to see if I can pick out any more details. So I'm doing the bare minimum to keep this thing going. During the end of the semester, they proceeded to call me multiple times. I denied every call, but they just kept on coming. I think there were about 14 calls that night. I turned my phone off. The following week I was in class. Students were presenting their final work on the projector. I had queued multiple tabs on the projection computer. 2 different students had work on Google Drive. When the second student had logged into their account, they didn't open up a private window, so it logged out the first student. I saw this happen, but the first student wasn't in the room, so when she came back, I asked her to re-log in. We were both standing in the projection booth. She was at one end of the computer, and I was messing with the sound system on the other side, but happened to turn and look at the projection screen when she was logging into the Google. This hit me like a ton of bricks. The username that she logged in with was the same username as the TextNow account that had been sending me photos. I quickly turned away, pretended to be busy with something until she had finished opening up her work. I thanked her. She left the booth without realizing her mistake. I tried to play it cool, but inside I was going crazy for the rest of the class. After almost a year, I finally knew who it was. She had finally slipped up, and honestly I was much more scared now than I had ever been. This person had a history of being pretty creepy around my friends, and although she had never personally interacted with me outside of class, all my friends had strange experiences. I made a meeting with a counselor who seemed to really care, and offered to look into it for me. A couple of weeks later, he emailed me saying the student is going abroad next semester, so that we're not going to do anything. I insisted that at least something temporary be put into place. They didn't do anything, but what did I expect? This school is pretty notorious for not giving a shit about their students. I didn't run into her again. She hasn't texted me. So far, for the time being, this is where the story ends. This happened to me during my first year of university, in October. I was living in the dorms, and I need to give you a brief rundown of the dorms. You need a key card to gain access to your specific floor. So even though someone on the 3rd floor and 4th floor live in the same building, they can't access each other's floors. I had injured myself playing sports, so I was under orders to rest, which meant no Halloween parties for me. Pretty sad for a horror fiend like myself, but to try and make the time a happy one, I busied myself helping to make costumes for people and doing their makeup. Once I was finally finished, I packed up my makeup and decided to watch some movies in my room. A guy popped up and introduced himself. We chatted for a little bit and exchanged email addresses. I walked back to my room and said goodnight to him. The first warning sign was that he walked into my room behind me, despite me saying that I was walking into my room. I felt really awkward and tried to say, in a roundabout way, that he just needed to leave, but he wasn't getting the hint. I finally had to say, "You need to leave my room now." I chalked this up to him maybe being drunk or something, but I did wonder how he got onto my floor if he wasn't with anyone partying. Before I went to bed that night, I checked my emails, and there were 5 from the creep. The first being, "Hey, I'm so glad that we're friends," and the rest asking me why I wasn't online. A few days later, I got a knock on my door when I was studying. It was him. I explained that I was studying, and I needed some privacy. He tried to walk into my room yet again, but I braced my arm on the frame and said firmly that I needed to study. The next day, he was at my door again, and the next. I began pretending that I was not home. Another day, there was a knock at the door. When I checked the peephole, there was no one there. I assumed that the postman had come. I opened up the door, and lo and behold, it was the creepy guy. He had begun hiding from the peephole so that I would be more likely to answer the door. I told my roommate never to open the door if he was there, and I told the people living on my floor that this guy was beginning to creep me out. So if he wanted to get onto the floor, whatever sob story he had given them, don't let him on. A few days after that, I was on the bus coming home. I got a text from someone who lived on my floor telling me not to come home because Creep was on my floor and was sitting in front of my door, just waiting. I went to a friend's house, spent the night, and when I got home, I was told that he waited for hours before leaving. At this point, I was getting freaked out. A few days after that, he began waiting outside the building, and if I left, he would follow me wherever I went. I was too spineless to tell him to go away, and I tried to be more passive about it. I never spoke, never gave any indication that I was paying attention, but he followed me to class, the cafeteria, and always tried to follow me home and get access to the floor. I went to the resident advisor, an older student that sort of watches over the floor, and told her what had happened. She spoke to the RA for his floor, and was told that Creep had been telling his own RA that they were best friends and dated. My RA tried to explain that I was uncomfortable, but the other one believed him, and that was that. Thankfully, one thing did deter him. He would never approach me if I was with a group of people. So my floor mates banded together. If I went to dinner, I went with my floor. If I wanted a drink or seconds, someone had to come with me. Walking to class, and even waiting for the bus was done in a group. He got onto my floor once when someone else was coming home. He forced his foot in the door to let himself in. I happened to be hiding in another room, and when he left my door to go and sit in the television lounge to wait for me, I went downstairs, ran around the other side of the building, and got into my room before he even noticed. Then the phone calls began. I never gave him my number, but he somehow obtained my mobile and my room phone, and at first it would be 1 to 2 calls a day, until I told him that I wanted him to leave me alone. Then the calls began to come every hour, with him begging and pleading for me to talk to him. Without caller ID, I needed to answer the phone because of school and my part-time job. At this point, it was November, and I was a wreck. I was trying to have a plan around doing simple things, like going for food or walking to a bus stop. Stress wasn't helping me recover from my injury, and I was losing weight. I just looked sickly. I went back to the RA and begged her to help me. She went to the head of the dorms, explained everything that was happening. I explained how far this had gone, and my roommate told them that he had followed her a few times, demanding that she tell him where I was. I felt pretty awful. She never told me this because she was afraid of upsetting me further, and I felt like I was an asshole for putting her through this garbage. I really don't know what went on behind closed doors. From what I guess, he was told to leave me alone, and any further contact would result in him being kicked out of the dorms. There was one email where he went insane on me, telling me how awful I was. How could I do this to him? We were so happy together. Surely I was cheating on him with another man. After that, nothing. At first, when I'd see him around campus, I would run to the women's toilets to hide. I'd see him around town, or on campus, and he'd always just stare at me. Never tried to approach me. Never tried to get my attention. Just staring. I used to walk by and try to pretend that I didn't notice him staring, and I'd try and act like my heart wasn't pounding out of my chest.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.